The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, I think we'll just give it another 2 minutes or so to allow people to join. So we'll start in 2 minutes at 5 past. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. My name is Robert Breker. I'm a principal software engineer at Citrix. My current role at Citrix is to focus on building a developer platform, particularly around Citrix Workspace and Microapps. I'm presenting today's session with Tom Mckelvey. So, Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So yes, my name is Tom. So I'm a software engineer, also part of the developer platform team. And a big part of my focus at Citrix is supporting our partners who are trying to build integrations on the developer platform and allowing them to do that successfully and provide sort of maximum user value.
Great. So in today's session, we will be talking about Citrix Workspace Intelligence capabilities and also microapps. How does the building work? How do you build your own microapps? So we'll provide an introduction and also a live demo of how you can build your own microapps. So we'll start with a couple of questions. So the first question is, what percentage of employees do you think is actively engaged in their workplace? So who's engaged in their job? Do you think it's 33%, 53, or 63? So I won't let you vote now, but so it's actually just 33% of the workforce that is actively engaged. So when I heard this number the first time, I was quite surprised by how low it is. The next one is, how many enterprise applications does the average enterprise use? Do you think it is 600, 800, or 900? Any of these numbers is quite big, I feel. Actually, it's 600. Last but not least, how many, so the use of Slack is becoming increasingly common in enterprises. So something that you can do in Slack is you can build custom integrations for other enterprise applications. So how many custom integrations do you think exists worldwide? So that is basically integrations that a company has built for other enterprise apps that only the company uses, but that isn't ending up in the marketplace in Slack. 1,800, 11,000, or 490,000? It's actually 490,000. So a very, very large number. And all of these numbers are very relevant to what we're trying to do here with Microapps and Workspace Intelligence. So in today's session, we will talk about what tooling Workspace Intelligence capabilities brings. We'll also be talking about how external systems, external enterprise applications can be integrated into Workspace. And we will talk about how functionalities from these integrated enterprise apps are then exposed in Workspace as microapps. So why Workspace Intelligence? What is it all about? We believe there is a productivity problem. So basically, the productivity year by year has gone up steadily. First, there was a time of back office digitization, the time of mainframes. Then there came personal computers, followed by the internet. So each of these has brought an annual gain of productivity, more output from your workforce. Then there was mobile. Again, there was a gain, but the gain was slower than in previous years. And over the last 2 years, the gain went down further, so it was only 1.2%. And that is despite of there being so many apps that are supposed to help the workforce. So we believe a key problem is that we keep adding new technology, more apps. So 10 or 15 years ago, that was just a traditional security perimeter with your enterprise apps on-prem in your own data center. Nowadays, there's lots of software as a service applications that are hosted somewhere in the cloud, that are in there in your enterprise mix, while you still have all these pre-existing systems in your traditional perimeter. So lots of different applications that people have to use. And we believe this is not driving productivity or happiness. There's too many apps. These apps get too little usage. There's too much complexity, which means people don't know where to find the information that they're looking for. They spend too much of their day just searching for information. And also there are too many interruptions from all these apps, which then leads to too little focus and too little focus on what employees actually want to do, the work that they want to get done. So today we believe that only 33% of the workforce are actively engaged. 51% of the workforce are not engaged, and 16% are actively disengaged. So they're actually working against the employer. So why is that? How do we fix that? Well, there seems to be a mismatch between enterprise applications and consumer applications. When you look at enterprise applications, they look typically like this, like that, or that, or that. We all know that from our day jobs. There's lots of these applications that all look and feel like this. It's not a lot of fun, so frequently I sit there like this. Well, when I'm at home, I get a much better experience. I get a single button with which I can do stuff. I get my Alexa device that I can talk to and ask to do things. It works like magic. While when I go to work, I occasionally still get terminal applications. it's really interesting to look at this difference. So how does Citrix Workspace Intelligence help? So what it all comes down to is when users use applications at home, what they're used to is a couple of functionalities. Basically, users are used to get an integrated feed with information that is relevant to them. That feed contains notifications of stuff they need to do. They also get clear actions, so they can interact with these notifications. And they don't need to press lots of buttons, but basically whatever they do is assisted by artificial intelligence. The system typically already knows what the user likely will want to do and suggests the right action to him. So how does this look in Citrix Workspace? So this is the new look of Citrix Workspace, what used to be Storefront. We basically get a notification feed in the center. In this notification feed, you get notification cards. These notification cards, you might notice, come from different enterprise apps. So they come from ServiceNow, from G Suite, from Concur, Tableau. Also, some of these notifications are directly actionable. So when you get an expense approval that needs to be approved or sent back, you can do that directly on the card. So that means that you don't have to go into the into SAP Concur to do anything with this. And also you can do standalone actions. So for actions where you don't get a notification, where you want to trigger something from scratch, you also have that option on the right. And when you click either a notification card or an action, you basically are offered to provide additional information. So that is then information that is being sent to the target system. So for example, this is to create a new expense request in Concur. So what's a microapp? A microapp basically takes one particular use case from an enterprise application and brings this into Workspace. So that means a user of Workspace can directly use the microapp without having to switch context, switch into the other enterprise application. So basically, when the choice is what microapps do you want to implement, when you take the example of a copy machine will have hundreds of buttons. Most of them you never use, but there's this one button, this green button that makes the actual copy that is being used in 99% of the times. And you basically want to implement this 99% case in a microapp and bring this to Workspace. If you have one of the exotic use cases, you don't need this in Workspace. So Workspace Intelligence comes with lots of integrated systems out of the box. So there's a growing list of this. So ready to be used. But actually, as I mentioned earlier, lots of enterprises will have their own custom systems. They want just another enterprise application, just a little something different. So Tom will now be talking about how we can basically integrate different systems from scratch. How do we take a random business application, a random enterprise application, and bring it into the Workspace? So we just do the swap to Tom. Tom, can you?
Yes, is it showing now?
Not yet. Yes, Jon.
Perfect. Okay, so as Robert mentioned, what I'm going to try and do very quickly for you now is explain the magic that's happening underneath the hood with Workspace Intelligence, and explain, how it is that we can pull out all of these useful notifications and these actions and this context, and how we can then allow you to surface that to your end users. So before we dive in too deep, we're just going to cover briefly some basic terminology. So the first one is system of record. So very simply, this is the thing that you want to connect to. So this would be something like Workday or SAP or Concur or whatever it is in the back end that you want to expose to your end users. And we often refer to this as the SOR. The next bit of terminology is integration. And this is the thing that speaks the language of the thing you want to connect to. So obviously that's lots of things, but this is essentially the bridge between Citrix Cloud and our system of record. So this is the part of Citrix Cloud that understands APIs and understands authentication, and it allows us to speak the same language so that you can pull out the information you need. So just to give you a quick idea of what this flow looks like, you're always going to start with the system of record that you're interested in, and you want to take information from that system of record and you want to expose it to your end user. And to do that, we're going to connect it all up to Citrix Cloud. So the first thing that we would do is we would connect it up to an integration. So as we said, this is the part of Citrix Cloud that can talk to systems of record. So in here, you would define exactly how we do that. Next, we would connect that up to the Microapp service. So this is a part of Citrix Cloud that allows us to define what UI elements look like, when we send notifications, when we send actions, all that sort of detail. And then from there, that gets connected up to the Citrix Analytics service and the notification service. So these are the centralized points that all of our actions and notifications go through, so that we have a one-place insight into what your users are doing. And this is also where we can decide where notifications are getting sent, to which users, to which devices, and all that sort of stuff. And then from there, it finally ends up in the workspace in front of your user. So in a scenario where we're trying to read out data to display as our user, the first step is to establish some authentication with our system of record. So to do this, we would have a service account that exists on the system of record, and we would use those credentials to read information into our integration. Once we've read that information in, we can then store that in a cache in Citrix Cloud, and this is an encrypted single tenant cache, and it's based on this cache that we're able to generate events and we're able to populate our UI elements. From there, we can then publish our notifications. So this goes via the analytics service, via the notification service, and ends up at our end user. So it's important to note that Citrix Event Engine works on a cache. So although many modern cloud services have the ability to generate their own events, by using our own cache, and having our own custom criteria, we're allowed to have much greater flexibility on when you get a notification. If we take the example of Jira, normally you get notified about everything you're watching, but by having our own cache, we're able to narrow that down to just tickets of a certain priority or created at a certain time, and really allow you to just show the things you want to actually see. The other advantage of the cache is that it allows us to have a cross-system event criteria. Because we're pulling information from lots of different sources into one place, we're able to be a bit smarter in how we check information across these different places to work out when to send you notifications. And obviously to do all those things, that's why we need to have the cache. One of the key parts of this cache is that we only want to extract data which is active. Obviously, not only is this good for security, but it also improves our performance and saves us having huge amounts of data stored in the cloud. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is trying to just extract the information which is still relevant to users and still active. And based off that, we can look for changes like new events or updated events or deleted or any other criteria. And when we see those being met, we can then send those notifications on to your end users, wherever it is they're trying to do their work. So one of the things Robert mentioned just a moment ago was that, in this picture, we have many systems that we already support. But there's going to be many customers who have their own bespoke things, or maybe not even saying bespoke, just not listed here, that they want to connect up. And our answer to that is the HTTP integration. So this is an integration which can talk via REST and understand JSON responses. And this integration can be configured to talk to a very broad range of systems of record and allow you to connect up your own systems that we don't already have support for. To do this, you do need to have an understanding of what the APIs in that system of record look like. But on our side, everything is as simple as we can possibly make it. So next, we are going to jump into a live demo of how we do this. So hopefully everyone can now see this is the admin view for the Microapps builder inside Citrix Cloud. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a new HTTP integration. And this is going to be a GitHub integration. So the first thing that we need to do here is we need to specify the URL which we will use to talk to the GitHub API. In this case, this is api.github.com. And the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to specify the authentication method we're going to use. So we support lots of different options, but for the demo today, I'm just going to be using basic. And then next, you just copy in the credentials of your service account. So just using my regular account today. And once we've done all of that, we just click add, and that will then start creating our integration. So now that we've specified the authentication information, the next thing we need to do is tell the integration which APIs it needs to talk to on GitHub. So for our example today, we're going to be pulling out the issues from a particular repo on GitHub. So to do that, we will be talking to this endpoint here. So this is going to be pulling out the issues for the Zen admin repo in GitHub, which I have my own fork of. So once we've specified that endpoint, we can put in some extra information about query parameters and headers if that's needed. In this case, I don't need any of that. So when I click test service here, what's happening is that we're going away, we're making the API call that I've specified, and here we can see an example of the data it pulls in. So this is how we can validate that everything is working. We can see that it's pulling in information from GitHub. The next thing we're going to do is generate the tables that will be populated in our cache in Citrix Cloud. So all of the table generation is done automatically. So here I just clicked this From API button. And what this does is it makes an API call to GitHub, sees the data that's returned, and automatically parses that JSON to work out the structure of the tables that we need. So when I click to edit this table, I can see these are all of the fields that is recognized in the JSON that was returned to us. And then in here, I can set a primary key for my table. And this is what we use to ascertain when we have unique entries. So now I can save that and I will click add. And this has now created this table for me in our cache, which it will populate by pulling in from this API endpoint. So what we're going to do next is we have our integration created. We've already done a synchronization. So this means we've already pulled in information from GitHub and populated our table. And next we want to start creating microapps that allow us to display this information to our end users. So I just clicked to add a new microapp, and now we're going to go in and edit that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give it a name, and I'm just going to call it issues. And then we're going to give it an icon other than the broken symbol. I'll just give it this one, and I will click save on this. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to define some UI pages that we're going to view. So the pages section here, I think earlier Robert showed the detail blade that you can see on the workspace. That's the equivalent of a page in the Microapp admin view. So we're going to go ahead and create a new page, which I'm going to call issues again. And this is going to be of page type of detail. So there are a number of options of different types of pages you could display. The detail page is one in which we show additional context about a particular notification. Alternatively, you could have a form to let people fill in information, or a table, or many other options. For each Microapp page, we have to specify which of our tables it's linked to. So this will be pulling information from the issue table. And we can also decide which fields from that we want to display. In my case, we'll be displaying the issue body and the issue title. Now, if I click add, this will create this Microapp and take us into the Microapp UI builder. So we're now in the UI builder. So this is a simple drag and drop environment that allows you to build your UI. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange my page so that the title goes on the top and we have the body underneath. And on the left-hand pane here, we can see these are all the options of the UI elements that we could add to this page. What I'm going to add now is a button. And what we're going to do is we're going to configure this button to allow someone to jump directly into GitHub in case they want to see more information about this issue or do some action in GitHub itself. So when we click on a UI element, on the right-hand side of the screen here, we get to see the properties for that element, which we can then change. So I'm going to rename my button to view on GitHub. And then we're going to add an action that happens when this button is clicked on. And we're going to add the go to URL action. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use a variable from our table. And we're going to use that as the URL which we will navigate to. In this instance, we will be using the HTML URL. So this is a parameter which GitHub returns to us, and this is basically the deep link for this particular issue. So we'll now click insert, and here we can see the double curly brackets here, which signify a parameter which will be dynamically filled in depending on the context of the ticket that we're looking at. So this is going to be automatically saved, so we don't have to click any save buttons on here. And this will be updated to end users as soon as you start making changes here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to define notification criteria. So now that we have this page, we have to decide when does a user get sent this page to be viewed. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new notification. As we mentioned before, we have quite a few options for how we decide when these are triggered. But for this demo, we're going to be using the new records trigger. And for this, we once again tell it which table of data we're interested in, which is our issue table, and we can then click add. This will then take us into the feed card page. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set this to run automatically every time we do a synchronization. So this is saying every time we put in information from GitHub, we want to rerun this trigger and validate whether there's any new records for us to look at. So we can see here, this is where we define the criteria for when the notification is generated. So currently, this will be generated every time there is a new record in the GitHub integration table. Additionally, we could have more filters. So we might be interested in a particular table number or a state. We can have any sort of trigger here that we want. We're then going to decide who this notification gets sent to. So for this demo, I'll be sending it to all subscribers, but you can also configure it to go to a particular user or a particular user group, depending on what's most relevant. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to define what's going to show up on this card as it appears in the user's feed. So we're going to say new user, and then we're going to insert a variable, which will be the title of the ticket. So here we can see a live card preview, which shows an example of what this would look like. We're also going to change the body of the card, and this will display the body of the issue they've got a notification about. If I could do that. And once again, here we can see this is an example of what our card will look like when it appears to an end user. The final thing we're going to do on this page is we're now going to define what happens when someone clicks on this feed card. So what we want to do is we want it to navigate to the issues page, which we created a moment ago, so that when they click on this feed card, it opens the blade with the additional context about this issue. An additional smart thing that we can do is we can also embed buttons directly onto the feed card. So for example here, if someone wanted to view this on GitHub or do some other simple action, we can put that directly on the feed card so that people don't even need to navigate to the detail view if it's not relevant for this particular instance. Okay, so now we have our basic Microapp set up. What we're going to do is we're going to subscribe a user to this Microapp so that it will appear in their Workspace feed, and then we will check that it's all working as we expected. So I'm subscribing a user called Mckelvey. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new issue in GitHub so that that notification gets triggered. So we'll just call this live demo and click submit. Now, when we go back into the workspace, if we now resynchronize this integration, this will pull in the new information from GitHub. And assuming I've set everything up correctly, our notification should now be triggered. So to validate this, we can go back into our notification and we can look at the event log. And we can see here that it has successfully generated a new notification, which has been sent off to the Mighty Pelican. So now we've navigated to the workspace. So here I'm just using the web version of the workspace, and we're going to log in as the Mighty Pelican. And hopefully we will then see the notification. Okay, and perfect. So we can now see what our workspace looks like, and we can see that for our Mighty Pelican user, they have a new card in their feed for the issue we just created. And if we click on that, we can see the page we defined appears with the correct information populated. And additionally, we can click on this button directly from this feed card, and that opens up our live demo ticket in the right place in GitHub. So this is a very good example of how we can send notifications to users. But one of the other key parts of Microapps is that we also want to be able to write back to GitHub and make changes to GitHub without having to follow a deep link every single time. So what we're going to do next is we're going to define a service action. So service actions are the API calls which we use to write back to the system of record. And for this example today, what we're going to do is we're going to create an action which allows us to close issues on GitHub. So to do this, we have to define what parameters have to be passed to this API call. And for this particular close issues API, we know that we need to just pass the issue number so that it knows which issue in particular we want to be closed. This particular REST API uses the patch method, and we will be talking to the endpoint that looks like this. So as I mentioned earlier, when we have these double curly brackets, this is a parameter which we're going to swap out with the relevant context. So now what we have to do is we have to define a parameter here so that the Microapp service knows what this issue number should be replaced with. So here we will tell it the issue number parameter in our URL is going to be replaced by the issue number which is passed to this action. And then finally, we have to specify some additional information about the JSON body. So if we're closing an issue, we simply have to provide a bit of JSON which says to set the state to closed. So now when we add this, we now have a service action defined here, which can be added to Microapps to allow users to choose to close a particular ticket. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go back to the page we created a moment ago, and we're going to add a second button. And this button is going to be used to kick off that close issue service action. So once again, we will rename that to close issue. We will add an action to run the service action. And then within the specification, we will tell it we want to run the close issue service action, which we defined a moment ago. In here, next, we need to define the parameters which we're going to pass to this action, so it knows which particular issue we want to close. So in this case, we're going to be using a value from the column. So this is basically saying we're going to be using a value from the table for this particular option. Alternatively, we could have users manually fill in a text box, or we could use lots of other criteria to decide what we pass back. And in this particular case, we're going to be passing the issue number back to that API call. Okay, so this has now been saved. So if we navigate back to the Workspace UI and we do a quick refresh, you should now see that when we click on the detail view, it now shows us the option to also close that issue, which should then allow us to close off this live demo issue, which I created a moment ago. So we just need to wait for this to finish logging in. Okay, try that again very quickly. This is the curse of doing a live demo.
Maybe you should tell a joke or something.
I didn't come prepared for that. Okay, so I appear to have broken the workspace. I promise this normally does work. I don't know if you want to give this another go, Robert, or if you want to just take over and save me the shame.
Why don't I go ahead with my presentation and we switch back to you once you have it?
Perfect. I will try refreshing a few more times.
I'm hoping I'm back on my screen. Just a second. Yep. Good. So what now? Something just went wrong in Tom's build, so he'll fix that now quickly up, and we'll hopefully see it working in a moment. But basically, what are the next steps? So what can you do with this? So we have kicked off back in January. We've kicked off a Citrix developer program. So that program is all about getting microapp developers up to speed and creating a community around it. So it's about learning how to develop microapp integrations, being able to build these microapp integrations. So you will get things like a free test instance. It also comes with things like a catalog, which is just like a marketplace. So you can submit integrations that you've built and share them with others. So that's the Citrix developer program. The catalog for Microapps is part of the Citrix Ready catalog. So you can see basically integrations that Citrix have built or that third parties have built. The first third-party integration in that catalog is from Sir. So that is a SaaS offering for CRM. Some of you might be aware of the developer conferences that we've launched last year. So we've launched a new conference series called Citrix Converge. We did that the first time in October last year. We were planning to do another one of these in Prague in March and another one in Bangalore in April. But due to current events, we've decided to convert this into a virtual event. So instead, we're going to do a Citrix virtual hackathon. So basically, this is a free event for people to get up to speed on the platform, to see how to develop microapp integrations. It is both learning and then actually building yourself. Let me just share that link in the chat. You should also have it in the chat if you want to open it right now. So basically, at this event, the event will be running for 10 days. During these 10 days, what I would suggest for anybody interested is you take, I don't know, a day or two out of your work time, and in your own time, you look at videos that we share, and then you try building something yourself. And once you have built something and you like it, you can also share it as a video with us. And for the most exciting builds, we will have prizes. So that's coming very soon. So you get to learn, you get to build, and also you get to connect with others. So we are building a community around this. We have a Slack channel. So we want to make this an interactive experience. We want to hear from you. We want you to talk with other developers. A different way to learn microapp development is the education course on the same topic. So this education course has launched, so you can take this right now. It actually is it is a very new course, which also means when you take this course now, you do not have to take an exam, so you directly go and get the certification for it. So that is the sign-up link for that. So Tom, how's it going?
It's working now.
That is good to hear. That was I was not surprised at all. Can you tell us what was wrong?
I wish I knew. I just refreshed one more time and it worked immediately afterwards. So I have no idea what I did. Okay, but hopefully it's now popped up. So this is what we should have seen a moment ago. So when we click on the blade view for this notification, we now see we have an additional button here, and that button is for closing the issue. And when we click that, this will then write back to GitHub. We can see it's been processed successfully and that notification has been removed. Now, when we go back to GitHub, we can see that close has been written back to GitHub in real time, and that issue has now been closed off. So this is just showing you, the ability to write back as well as to read information in. So that was all I was going to say. So do you want to jump back over in charge, Robert? Perfect.
Sure, thanks, Tom. So we've demoed that like 20 times and it always worked. So today must be a bad day. So building microapps, building your own microapps is really easy. It's basically a low-code, no-code interface. Nearly anybody can do it. So what have you learned about today? So basically, the reason behind Workspace Intelligence is productivity is taking a hit from too many apps and too much complexity. Workspace Intelligence helps. Consumer applications are showing us how to solve this problem, how to make it really easy for the user, how to have notification feeds, and really present the user with the one key use case that he's interested in, that he needs in 99% of the time. Microapps are all about exposing functionalities to the user, a button that he needs to press. Integrations are there to connect target systems, your enterprise applications. And Citrix Workspace is all about extensibility. So you don't need to be a professional developer even to extend Citrix Workspace. Anybody can do it. Good. And now we have plenty of time for questions. Shall we look what we have? Just trying to work GoToWebinar. So one of the questions we received is, how do you get to be on the developer program as a current CSA partner or CSP? So the developer program is just another program that you can join. It's basically a different form. So the way you join this program is basically, in order to get a test instance, anybody can go and get a test instance for Workspace. All you have to do is you go to developer.cloud.com. I'll also share it in the chat in a moment. So you can basically get started with development there. And this page will also guide you to the developer program and tell you what you have to do to sign up. Okay, any more questions? Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you very much for listening in today, despite the technical difficulties. I hope you have learned something new. Thank you very much. And that's a wrap.